How do blessings work? People travel all over the world sometimes just to get a blessing from a righteous man, a holy man, what we would call a tzaddik, a man of God. So they give you a blessing. How does that impact anything? I'm going to teach you the uh, the science of the spirituality of blessings, so you understand how it actually works, because it does work in a certain method, and I will do that by way of a story. There was a great Hasidic master by the name of the Rebbe Rashab. He was the fifth of seven Lubavitcher Rebbes. He was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and one of his followers came to him very, very distraught. He wanted to see him in a private meeting to ask him for a blessing. And the Rebbe Rashab had an older brother who intervened on behalf of this man because he saw he was so distraught, and he arranged for this meeting. And the Rebbe Rashab saw him, and this man spoke to him about whatever it was that was on his mind that was very serious. And the Rebbe Rashab responded to him and said, "I'm sorry, I cannot help you." Now, when someone comes to a tzaddik and asks for a blessing, usually it's because the natural means by which to resolve whatever the issue is have not worked. So then you go to a higher source for higher intervention, which is what this man did. And when the higher intervention sort of closes the door on you, then you are really devastated, because there seems like there is no hope and there's no help. And so he left the Rebbe Rashab's office, and he broke down in bitter tears, in total devastation. When the Rebbe Rashab's older brother saw him, he asked him, "Why are you so distraught? What happened when you spoke with the Rebbe, my brother?" And the man said that the Rebbe said, "I cannot help you." Now, the Rebbe Rashab's older brother was quite surprised by this, because it's very unusual that a Rebbe would say such words to someone. "I can't help you." Either they would give them a blessing that everything should work out, or whatever it may be, but not an explicit blessing, but to just leave a person like, "I can't help you," in a very cold way was very surprising. So he went to his brother, the Rebbe Rashab, and he said, "What type of a behavior is this, that a Jew comes to you for help? Even if you can't help them, don't just leave them in a state of hopelessness. Just give them some words of encouragement, but you tell them, 'I can't help you.'" So the Rebbe Rashab said, "Why? What happened?" And he said, "Well, the man is crying bitter tears because he feels that the situation is hopeless." So the Rebbe Rashab told his brother, tell him to come back in. And when he came back into his office, he gave him a blessing that everything should be resolved and everything should work out. And the man walked out elated, and in fact, everything worked out. The wonder about the story is, why, in fact, didn't the Rebbe Rashab initially give him the blessing? And here's the reason why. And this is a very important point, which is very critical to understanding how blessings work. The Rebbe Rashab sensed, when the man first came into him to ask him about his issue, that the man was relying on the Rebbe Rashab to resolve his problem. Now, the reality is that the Rebbe Rashab cannot resolve anyone's problems. The one who resolves all problems is Almighty God. And so he saw that this man was not in the condition to actually be able to receive the blessing. And therefore, even if the Rebbe Rashab would give him a blessing, the blessing would never arrive, because this man did not have his faith in God where it needed to be. And so he said, "I can't help you." And the idea of saying, "I can't help you," was that the Rebbe Rashab knew that was a harsh statement, just disregarding him and saying, "There's nothing I can do for you." But that actually cracked open the barrier and the shell that was dividing this man from God. And at that point, what did the man do? If the Rebbe Rashab can't help, he only has one source of help, and that is to turn to God. And so he broke down in bitter tears, praying to God that God should help him. Now he was a receptacle. Now he was able to receive. He was conditioned to be able to receive a blessing. And so when he came back in to the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Rashab gave him the blessing that awaited him on high, but he was unable to receive because he was not in the condition. He was not a vessel that would be able to catch, to receive, to contain that blessing. And so what we learn from the story is that there are two things that happen when there is a blessing. And you can think of it as a financial exchange in some respect. There is an account that holds funds. There is an account on high that holds blessings. Everyone has such an account. When a tzaddik gives someone a blessing, they're giving them the blessing because they can actually see what common people can't see, and that is whether this person's account on high, their spiritual account, actually has this blessing available for them. And if it does, what the tzaddik was able to see that it can do is give the person a blessing, and that blessing actually withdraws the blessing from the account. But we know that a withdrawal from an account is not enough. There needs to be an account that can receive the withdrawal. You know, when you're transferring funds from one account to another, it's got to be, and there is an account that we have down below, and that is our material account, where this spiritual blessing is translated into a physical experience that we can experience in this world. Now, if we are not a wholesome vessel for that, for whatever reason, then even though the Rebbe can give the blessing has nowhere to go, and it will not be helpful. So therefore, a Rebbe wants two things. One is that we can withdraw the blessing. And sometimes withdrawing the blessing involves that the Rebbe can see what a common person can't see, that the blessing is available in the person's spiritual account. Sometimes to withdraw it requires some additional spiritual effort on behalf of the person, and that is doing a certain mitzvah, which sometimes the Rebbe will tell the person to do in order to withdraw the blessing. And then sometimes the Rebbe can see that the person is not in a position to receive the blessing, and they need to humble themselves, make more space for God, and stop taking up so much space with their own ego. And in doing that, then they become a receptacle for the blessing, and the blessing can flow down to the person. This is the spiritual science of blessings. And we experience this in this week's Torah portion because the Torah tells us about Abraham. It tells us that in Beersheba, in the city of Beersheba, where Abraham lived for, I think it was about 25 years, as Rashi says, he actually established something called an eshel. Now, an eshel literally means a tree, but actually our sages teach us that eshel is spelled with three letters, Aleph, Shin, Lamed, which stand for three Hebrew words, Achila, Shtia, and Levaya, which means eating, drinking, and escorting. And that is that when people would travel through Beersheba, which is a desert area, and you can visit that place in Israel today, you will see it's a desert area, and there were very, very little resources there, but Abraham lived there and he developed resources. And so he had food, he had water to drink, and probably wine as well, and other forms of drink, which are very hard to get in the desert. And he would always escort, which is a Jewish law that if you have guests, you escort them when they're leaving. You actually walk with them a bit. And he would do this whenever guests would come. And we're taught that Abraham would do something which was quite strange and maybe disturbing. And when we find that someone like Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or our matriarchs, or any of the great Jewish heroes that are mentioned in the Torah, do something which is strange or unusual, then we know we need to look deeper to understand what they're doing. What he used to do is he would feed people. People would come to his tent, and we know that he was known for his hospitality. He was very hospitable. That's one of the things that Abraham was known for, a tent with a door on each side so people can just walk in. And he would give them a 5-course meal. He would give them a full-out 5-star meal, with everything and anything. Happily gives it to them. And when they were done, he would tell them, they would say, "Thank you, Abraham, for this delicious meal in the middle of a desert. Who can get such a meal over here?" And Abraham would say, "Don't thank me. Thank the creator of the world who provided it. Let's say a blessing to thank God." And many of the guests would, in fact, do that. But some of the guests would not. Remember that Abraham was the source of monotheism. So he is the one who is teaching the world about the one God. So some of them may not have even known about God. They were still idolaters. And he said, "Well, we have a very special program over here that's called Pray or Pay." So you can either pray and thank God for the food, and if you want to deny God, that's okay. But then, if it didn't come from God, that's fine. It came from me, then you got to pay me. And by the way, a 5-star dinner in Beersheba doesn't cost $150 a plate. it costs $750 a plate. Extremely expensive, right? Because hard to get that deal over. See, he would build them. And then suddenly, the person has second thoughts about the non-belief in God. And they said, well, maybe I'll go for the pray instead of the pay. And that would typically transfer the person from the position of not praying to praying, of paying to praying, right? Now you ask, okay, so what is the value of such a prayer? What is the value of such a prayer? I mean, the guy is trying to save money. He's not praying, right? So why would Abraham even do this? Is just playing a game with them? But no, Abraham was not playing a game with them. Abraham understood a deep insight that's very valuable for all of us to understand about ourselves and about others. And that is at the core, every one of us does believe in God. We do. And sometimes we have barriers that are sitting on that. We come up with all our philosophies, we become intellectuals, we have agendas and reasons or fears why we don't want to buy into that awareness that every soul has, that there is a God, because the soul is an emanation of God. So it knows that there's a God, right? Not empirically, right? It doesn't know that there's a God empirically. It knows that there's a God just viscerally. It just knows that, right? It won't be able to prove it to you logically, but it knows it spiritually. It just knows it because it is a piece of God. But very often that there are layers that cover that awareness for whatever different reasons. Sometimes we're born that way. Sometimes we develop that over time. And then we come up with an entire philosophy we build about why we don't believe in God, etc. Right? And what needs to be done to awaken a person to their inherent knowing and believing that there's a God is cracking open the shell that is covering the soul. And that is often done through something which is a little bit harsh. Well, at least it seems to be harsh, but it's only harsh externally. Internally, it's not harsh at all. It's the greatest act of love. The same way the Rebbe Rashab was very harsh with his chassid, with his follower, who wanted a blessing, all with the intention to crack him open from this misnomer that the Rebbe Rashab can help him. So he's awakened to the truth that only God helps, sometimes through the Rebbe, through a tzaddik, but it's God who's helping. Likewise, Abraham was cracking open these individuals by saying, you're so obstinate, it's okay, pay some big bucks. And suddenly that broke down their resistance to the concept of God. And suddenly it began to open them up. That's actually what it does. And that's what Abraham was doing, right? Clearly, he wasn't about the money. He was happy to have them pray instead of pay. But he was there because he was concerned about people and he wanted people to be connected with the truth. And so therefore, he offered them this opportunity. And this teaches us that sometimes, and we have to do this delicately, you have to be careful, you have to know that the person will be ready for this, but sometimes we have to take a strong stand for another person. And that strong stand will, in the short term, be painful for them. It will hurt them. But in the long term, it can help them enormously. Now, you have to assess this carefully to make sure that you feel that they are ready for this and this will be that they will end up productive. If it won't end up productive in the end, then it's being done prematurely, and that's not good. Some people are harsh and they justify their harshness with this. No, that's not good either. It's genuinely taking a very strong stand for a person for them. Nothing to do with me. I don't want to do this. I wish I didn't have to do this, but I'm doing this for you. And that was the gift that Abraham gave to all of the visitors who visited him.